me again. We don't do a regular upload schedule, so it's just like a surprise treat whenever it happens.
Nice.
So it's happening. I'm here today with Emily. See, I told you every time I goof it. Emily McAllister. That's my signature is like goofing the intro.
Totally.
So yes, welcome back to Lights of Recovery. I'm Jess with Addiction Help, and today joining me is Emily McAllister. Nailed it that time. And I am so stoked to talk to her. I mean, I'm stoked to talk to everyone, but for different reasons every single time. And I'm excited that it seems that you are a fellow fitness girly, which I never thought I would be. But here we are. That's my era. And also, you're a mom. You are sober for how long?
A little over 15 years.
Oh my God, that's
Amazing.
so sick. Okay, so we're like into the double digit, and yeah, and you have a lot of stuff that you do on social media, which is really exciting too, because I think we've talked to a lot of people who like one person, has his own clothing brand and that's how he contributes to the recovery community. But then a lot of people are just out there kind of doing their thing quietly. And so I'm so excited to talk to somebody that's doing it very publicly in support of the recovery community. So, all that said, without completely putting you on the spot, let's just dive in.
Okay.
I mean, do you have any immediate thoughts or where would you like to
Oh my
start?
gosh, it's so much. Well, thank you first.
I know, right?
So fun. Love to talk, especially about myself. Just kidding. Let's work.
Easy.
No, it's funny with the whole like social media of it all because I literally, when I started with social media, I was like a mommy blogger. And this was like a long time ago. And I initially, I just always was like, have been a writer and I wanted to like be in the mix and sharing and all this stuff. And I initially like did not share about my sobriety or recovery. I was like, afraid of being like judged or my kids being judged. And so this was like kind of the beginning of Instagram when everything was a little bit curated more so than it is now.
Mm.
But I was also like, I'm not a curated person. Like I am messy and like I'm an open book and I'm just kind of like can't help but like say what's on my mind. And so my whole angle was initially kind of more like authentic motherhood. And I'd connected with a bunch of other like mom bloggers and I had gone on this road trip to go to a conference with this other girl who was like way more successful at this than I am. And she was like, why are you not sharing about your sobriety? And it like changed everything. And that was kind of the beginning of like the shift for me on social media where I was like, you know what? Like, there's no like it wasn't that I was ashamed of being sober. It was just that I didn't want to like put the burden of my disease on my kids, have them be judged for it. But the fact is like they have a sober mom. Like end of
Right.
the day, like,
Well,
and that's a good thing,
and
could be a lot worse. Yeah.
it's amazing. And I think, it's so unfortunate that anyone feels that way
Yeah.
because God, what an accomplishment. But I think sometimes, we get into this fear of, okay, well, in order to be sober or to have been somebody that has conquered an addiction, you had to have had the addiction first.
Correct.
And I think there's still a level of guilt, shame, societal pressure to, assigning morality to addiction and thinking that it must have been some personal failing. So while, yes, good for you that you're sober now, like, you're only there because, you screwed
Because you were
up
like,
before, or,
screw
did
up. Yeah.
something wrong.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, addiction's not great. I'm not,
No.
glorifying it, but it's not this like, oh, you're a terrible person. And thus, now you're less of a terrible person. Like, it's just, that's
Totally.
not how it is,
No, and it's like also to be able to separate, like, because for me at least, when I'm not sober, when I'm loaded, I do pretty terrible things. You know what I mean? Like but to separate the way the disease affects us from the person, and I think it's like really a cool opportunity to be able to kind of like, I don't want to say the word educate people, but to show them like, hey, like this is what a normal person who got sober is like. It's not like this. It's not always like an after school special. You know what I mean? So just to kind of normalize it too. And and it's so interesting because now like there's like being sober is so much more normalized than it's ever been. I think people are talking about mental health a lot more. They're talking about addiction a lot more. And when you really think about it, like everybody for the most part knows somebody like everybody's got like a family member or a friend who has struggled with some form of addiction. And for me, it's like, it's not just like, I mean, it runs so deep in me. Like it started way before I ever started drinking or doing drugs. It's funny you mentioned like the fitness stuff. I mean, I got sober because I went into treatment for an eating disorder. And I was like so in denial
Wow.
about my drinking and using because I kept surrounding myself with people who I perceived to be worse than me. That like, I was like, I know it's not normal to throw up your food every day, but like the people I'm hanging out with are partying like me. So I'm fine. Or there were, or I would like, burn through those people, find people who I perceive to be worse so that I could justify what I was doing. But it's just so, it
Yes.
runs so deep for me. It's like I can turn anything into a food addiction. It's like playing whack-a-mole.
And that's how it
It
is,
is. It
honestly,
is.
with some people. And it's like, it's again, it's not a moral failing. It's just the addiction monster
Yes.
comes in different forms and shapes. And
Hmm.
what it boils down to, and I think I've said this on other episodes, but I always want to talk about it, is it's it's this like deep compulsion,
Hmm.
this almost like this voice, this monster, this, shadow, so many things that people have used to describe it. That's you feel like you're almost a slave to it,
Yeah.
and you have to listen to that voice. That's why for some people, um, they have medication that helps take that craving out.
Right.
Or for others, I know somebody that went through treatment for alcohol
Hmm.
addiction, and they took, oh gosh, what is it called?
And abuse. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And it
It
basically,
makes you
for those
sick,
who
right?
don't know,
Yeah. Oh,
it makes
yeah.
you barf a lot. It makes you feel awful.
Yeah.
And for them, what it did is it gave them this sense of relief that I know that if I were to listen to that internal monster, I would make myself very violently
Yeah.
ill and be miserable. So almost it gave them an excuse to ignore that
Right.
compulsion. And that for them was such an awakening because they didn't realize this whole time that in so many ways they were a slave to that sort of the disease, really, that
Yeah.
internal monologue of, I don't really want to drink, but I feel like I have to for some reason. And then you fall into this trap. But then knowing, oh, this is going to make me very sick, sort of eliminated that.
Uh-huh.
Like, well, sorry, sorry, monster, I can't feed you today because I'm just going to puke a lot.
I mean, it's
So
even kind of like
it,
the same theory as like rehab because it just puts the brakes on it long enough to get your mind clear. But like that to me, it's like so interesting because when going into treatment, I was like, okay, this is going to fix me and I'm going to be all good and da da da. But it's like, that's not even it. Like that puts the brakes on it. And then the real work really starts after that because it's like, now you have to show up in life, and to piggyback on what you were saying, it's like that voice is like this inability to like sit with yourself and be still and to like not find something to take yourself out of that present moment. And that's it. Like I'll find if I'm not treating my ism, I can say any kind of ism, but I'm not treating that, then I
yeah,
find myself engaging. I've stayed sober for 15 years, but I've definitely done some things that I'm like, well, that wasn't good for me. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's very interesting. It's really interesting to observe yourself as a person uh with an addiction disease. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, like the brain is so interesting. I try to not judge it and not be like so bad, but it is like more like it is like, wow, like it is so cunning. Like it will find ways to like separate you or to distract you from
yes.
the present moment. Crazy.
Yes, and it's something, that I really enjoy considering is, the brain is just another organ.
Hmm.
Your brain is not you, it's just part of you, and therefore, it can also be wrong. It can be
Right.
flawed.
That's true.
And as, somebody that's been through a lot of therapy, sometimes I know that while my emotional response, that's very me, how I choose to behave is that becomes the conscious effort. And that
Hmm.
becomes the separation of your brain sort of doing things, reacting,
Hmm.
being more animalistic or whatever trauma you have stored versus
Yeah,
who you are. And those are two separate things. So addiction is very similar
it is.
in
It's like replacing
that
that
same
like
pain.
reaction with a response. Like, okay, like, my because I'm the same way. I'm very I'm like a passionate person. It's interesting too because I really thought like I used to make excuses for myself, like, well, I'm just like this. I was just born this way and I just have to tell the truth and I just have to say this. And it's like, actually, no, like you don't have to be like I can react in that first, like I have that. And usually my first initial instinct is not the right one. Like usually like if someone upsets me, like I want to lash out, but like that's not the better choice. That's not like the emotional sobriety choice. Like the better choice is to pause and to be like, okay, well, if I do lash out at this person, what's that going to look like? Am I going to owe them amends? Am I going to get arrested? Like, there's all sorts of consequences.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want? How do you how do you want to live? But that's
Yes.
feels like deeper into sobriety. I feel like when you first get sober, it's like anything goes, just don't get loaded. It's like you get away
Right.
with
Just
some
like,
real
just
bad behavior.
pump the
Yeah.
brakes. Let's
Yeah.
restart. Well, okay. The perfect segue. I would love to actually touch a little bit on your eating disorder
Okay.
as
Yeah.
well, if that's cool
Absolutely.
with you, because I think that is something that I would really love to jump into a lot more in these
Yeah.
podcast episodes, because they're just so closely related,
Totally.
and recovery isn't just addiction. It's so many other mental health issues,
Yes.
and eating disorders and addiction are just so closely tied together.
Absolutely.
So, all right, let's start from the beginning. Paint
Amazing.
us a picture.
Well, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. So I grew
Yep.
up with heroin chic and like 17 magazine and Vogue magazine and supermodels. And I am 5'3.5". I have a short waist. I didn't know that the models were 6 foot tall. I didn't know that I couldn't achieve that look. And I really do think it started with some mental health stuff for me. I think I started to experience like depression at, like, I would say around like 13, 14, which is like pretty normal, I guess, for when that starts to kind of come out. Hormones are raging, all this stuff. My body was changing. I was like a very scrawny little kid, very active. I played very competitive soccer, but around that age, things start changing and your body starts changing. I love my parents. They did the best they could, but nobody was talking to me about anything. So it was like, my body's changing. Nobody's saying like, hey, this is going to happen, because I have a 13-year-old now and it's a daughter, and it's wild because I'm like, her brain is still so young, and I'm like, wow, like your body betrays you at that age. You're a kid with a woman's body. And like, that's a trauma. Like, that's like a lot to process. So I'm really like, I annoy the crap out of her because she does not want to talk about that stuff. But I'm like, I'm like, whatever. We're talking about all this stuff. We're normalizing it. I don't care how embarrassing it is. And that's because I'm
Good.
like also very hyper aware and sensitive about like body image issues, because I just don't want my kids. I pray that they don't have to go through what I went through, because it was bad. So around that time when I started this feeling that depression, I wasn't hungry and I would like not eat. And I would notice that I would get thinner, and it felt very empowering, but I'm not like I'm not a good anorexic. So like I would eventually eat and I would binge. And my solution to that was to throw up the food. I have no idea where I learned that from. Maybe I saw an after school special. I really don't know, but it worked. And so I'll fast forward, but like through high school, um, I on and off was bulimic. And when I would lose all that weight, I would get such positive feedback, and people like, oh my God, you're so skinny
Oh
and so good.
gosh.
Like the boys were
Yep.
looking at me and all this stuff. And I also didn't have anyone talking to me about sex, or like, I really thought my entire worth was tied to whether or not boys liked me or wanted to have sex with
Yeah.
me or whatever, you know what I mean? And so it was all very
Well, that's
intertwined.
just such a cultural
It
thing
is.
too, I think, growing up. I mean, it is at that age anyway. You hit puberty and hormones and stuff,
Mhm.
and suddenly you're now comparing yourself to your peers in a way that you never have
Totally.
before, for reasons that you never have before. And that's very complicated and confusing. And then, yeah, the sense of my value
Mhm.
is attached to what the opposite sex thinks of
Yes.
me,
I really,
you know?
really thought, like, I think I grew up watching like 16 Candles and Dirty
Yes. Yep.
Dancing. And I still love these movies, but in my mind, I was like, you have to be good at sex. You have to be sexually appealing. You have to be thin, and you have to be pretty. And it was like, I didn't feel like I didn't feel pretty. I didn't feel thin. Even when I was like, it never, because that's like the psychological part of an eating disorder, is like you get body dysmorphia. You cannot see yourself properly. And then I would get into these stages where I was drinking a lot and I would put on weight, because if you drink 40s every day after school, like loser guys and then like eat a freaking meatball sub with them, like you're going to gain weight pretty quickly. So that would happen. And that did happen. And then, so I found myself without knowing it, like battling like these dual addictions and kind of going back and forth. And meanwhile, when I was like 15, they diagnosed me with ADD, right? But like, this was not cool back then. Like now it's like everyone's got adult
Wow,
ADD. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like this was
That's
like,
kind of uncommon
well, because
for our
I was
age
starting
group
to get
to
in
get a
trouble.
younger
And so my
diagnosis.
parents were really looking for
Ah,
something to like, they're like, she's smart, she's good at stuff. Like, what is going on? I decided after my like sophomore year of high school, they're like, oh, the school is too big. You're getting lost in the shuffle. I'm like, yeah, it's the school's fault. Blame the school. And
right,
I
right.
got moved to
Mm.
a private school that was like half boarding students, half day students. And the only difference was it was smaller and there were better drugs. You know what I mean? It was like, and then they were writing me prescriptions of Ritalin. And so my friends and I were just putting it right up our nose, 2 days in, the whole prescription's gone. And I found that with that, you could get very thin because it's an amphetamine.
Oh,
So you're
yep.
handing over like a 15, 16-year-old amphetamines, and it's like, here you go. And I'm a 16-year-old drug addict, budding drug addict. And so,
So, how did the drug use start for you? Because it sounds like the two things were very intimately
yes,
tied in
I
this
think,
weird sort of coming of age
yeah,
nightmare you were
it
living,
really was.
honestly.
Everything was so intertwined. I think it's really interesting because when I look back, like now as a sober person, like I do not like to have anything in like if I had to take if I have to take like a night well, like I'll panic because I'm like, what's gonna happen? My husband's like, you're gonna fall asleep. That's what's gonna happen. But like I think I had a very healthy fear of drugs as a young person. I grew up in a home where people were not doing drugs. There were other forms of addiction, but there wasn't alcoholism or drug addiction. So I had that healthy fear, but like I also was like super codependent. I wanted people to like me. I wanted to be a part of. And so I would kind of power through those fears. So, it starts with weed. We would go to I had a friend whose brother was 2 years older than us, and him and all his two friends would be at their house. So we would go with them. And then it was kind of like progressive. It was like, okay, well, what's this going to do? What's this going to do? And, um, and I was terrified, but I did it. Like I really was terrified a lot of the time when I would like try something. But then at some point, like it kind of switched where I like wasn't scared anymore. It's like kind of that like, well, I don't care what happens type of thing where it's like you just stop really hearing what happens to you, which is a pretty dark
It's
place
like
to
that
get to.
mixed self.
Yes.
Yes, that's like there's like this mixed self-loathing
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
at least in my experience, kind of comes into, I've talked in before about I drank my way through 2020
Yeah. Well, a
with
lot of people
my
did.
grief. Right. Well, right. And that's the weird part. Cause for me, it wasn't about the pandemic. That was sort of like a bonus nightmare. But I lost my
Oh,
grandmother, who was, my favorite person, very maternal figure for me. And
I'm
I
sorry.
just couldn't cope. And I just numbed myself with alcohol, like so many people will. But there were so many times that I would wake up and I would be like, okay, I mean, I'm hungover. I feel like shit. I don't want to drink tonight.
Mhm.
We're not drinking tonight. And then come, 4, 5, 6 o'clock,
There you are.
it's
Yep.
again, it's that
Yep.
monster, it's that shadow that you feel like you need to appease. And in another episode, Ashley and I spoke about this, where she even shared that there were days that as she's sipping the alcohol, like her first drink of the night, she's, tearing
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
because it's this combination of, I don't want to do this, but also I've started hating myself in such a weird way that this is what shitbag drinkers do. And I'm a shitbag drinker. And so I'm just going to do it. It's so
It's the phenomena of
terrible.
craving. It's the disease. It's interesting because that's like when I think about the very end, like I've relapsed a few times, not within this 15 years, but prior to that. But like the initial time when it was like the first time when I went into treatment and I was just like, I'm gonna die if I don't get help. I the thing I like to remember, this old timer guy once told me, he's like, pain has a short-term memory. You have to remind yourself about like what it was like at the end, because that, like, if you don't, you'll get loaded. And I will never forget waking up. I was staying at a friend's mom's house. I was not welcome in my family, in my mom's home. Had been, I mean, I never had to sleep on the street, but technically homeless. Like I was crashing on couches, letting guys put me up in hotels, like just really slumming it. You know, I had no money. I'm writing bad checks to get by. And I woke up at my friend's mom's house. She was out of town. And I'm laying there. It's like 7 a.m. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to do this today. Not going to do this. And like 7 a.m., it's just on and cracking between the like bulimia and the drugs. And alcohol. I just couldn't stop. And that's like really such a dark, like horrible place to be. So anyone who is experiencing that, like there is, you know, there's hope, but that is just a hopeless place to be. And that is like, that does kind of introduce the gift of desperation. It's like, okay, I'm out of ideas because I can't do this, you know, where you just realize how freaking powerless you are over it. But I never want to forget that feeling because I hear people share about that meetings. I'm like, I remember that feeling. I don't ever want to feel that way again, like ever. It's,
And
yeah.
for some people, it's a specific moment and oftentimes is referred to as rock
Hmm.
bottom. But it's not always this sort of grand
No.
Hollywoodized, I'm crying in the rain on the streets, whatever. A lot of times it's, it's this series of quiet moments with yourself where you're alone with your
Yeah.
thoughts and your thoughts become loud enough to get through. And it's often a buildup of those moments that leads you to say, okay, fine, something's got to
Uh-huh.
change. So what was that for you?
Okay. Right. I can tell you a few and I really do. I really do. I heard another, I hear all these like saying, you say someone says something to you and I'm part of 12-step recovery. So people say things to you and you think it's like the most profound thing. And you're like, that person's a genius, but it's all just stuff that's been repeated and handed down. But you know, someone once told me you hit bottom when you stop digging because I hit a lot of freaking bottoms getting loaded. There were times where I was like, I think I'm gonna die. Like I really thought I was gonna die and I didn't, where I would go to bed and pray to not wake up, you know, and that's a pretty low place to be. But that last time, be- that last time before I went to treatment, I was in that house. I woke up, I couldn't stop. I picked up a butcher knife because I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I was like, I'm going to kill myself. And I held it to my wrist and I was too chicken shit. You know, I could not slit my wrist. Not saying that's a good idea. Not suggesting that to anybody.
There are
Yes,
resources.
no, but like I couldn't live, I couldn't die. And I did what all the tough guys do and I called my mom. And I had done that. That's how I had been living. I'm from Boston originally, the Boston area, suburb of Boston. And I had been living in Arizona for a few years. And I had come back home because I was in a lot of trouble. I lost my job. I wasn't paying my bills. I was dodging the landlord. I mean, I was just a hot mess. And I knew my mom was like 12-step friendly. And so I was like, I didn't think I was an alcoholic, but I knew that if I used that verbiage, like I could get a plane ticket home. And so I had called her and said, I'm an alcoholic. I need help. Da, da, da. She brought me home. I lasted less than a week in her home because now I'm detoxing off of everything in her home and just a total pile, just being mean. Like, you know how we are. Like, or I mean, it's not pleasant to be with somebody who's coming off of anything really. But so that's when I ended up like kind of couch surfing and figuring out. Like she had bought me a T pass, which is like the public transportation in Boston. I had a, I was like, it's just when I look back, it's like hilarious because I was like, I had the T pass, I had a skateboard, I had a really bad freaking haircut because I had gotten drunk and thought I should cut bangs. So I was like rocking a pump before it was cool. Like it was not cute. Like I was just all
Oh
stuffed up. I
boy.
thought I looked good because I was so skinny. You know, it's all that mattered. And I was just a mess. And I called my mom from that friend's house and I was like, I need help or I'm going to die. And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I am going to die. Like, if I don't get help, I'm going to die. And so she's like, I'll help you if you will go somewhere that's 12-step based. I'm like, I don't care where I go. I need help. And so, like, 2 days later, I was on a plane back out to Arizona, to Wickenburg, Arizona. I went into a facility called Rosewood Ranch, which is right down the street from the Meadows. And I think Metallica was there at the time that summer. And I was like, yeah,
Wow.
and we're going to see Metallica. Like I didn't see anyone famous, but, and I got there just, we didn't have a lot of money. My grandmother had passed away. So there was a little bit of an inheritance. I knew that that's what was paying for it. So I treated rehab like it was my only chance because it really was. But it was so hard. I mean, I walked in there so uh, delusional. I walked in there. I said, okay, it was June 30th, 2004. I said, okay, but I need to be out of here by August 4th. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I need to be out of here by August 4th. I'm going to go to Reggae on the River. And they're like, you're so you're not going to Reggae on the River. I didn't have tickets. I didn't have tickets. My friends and I had talked about going. Like we talked about doing a lot of things on a bar stool that we never did, like you make all these plans. And I didn't get out by August 4th, but that was kind of the like thing that put the brakes on it. And it wasn't the end of the road for me, but that was the first time where I surrendered and I was just like out of ideas and willing to I was like, I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I thought I was a crazy person who was not going to be able to live in society. I thought I was going to be in a padded room because like, what the hell is wrong with me? You know what I mean? Like to me, an alcoholic was
Yes.
a homeless man under the bridge with a brown paper bag. And I didn't look like that.
Yes. So many people have that
I
concept,
know.
or they take to the most extreme or the most Hollywood or the most
Hollywood. Yeah.
visible. And
Yeah.
yes, you have Hollywood and you have people in our society that are very visible in their addiction,
Yeah.
usually people who are homeless. And so that becomes your perception of it and not what's
It's like the inside stuff.
hidden
Yeah.
behind, yes, and behind the white picket
Mhm.
fences and right here in our own neighborhoods and in varying levels too, because you also think that it's the person that is completely destitute, that has burned every single bridge, that is,
Right.
on 12 different drugs, and it's not always that
No, it
either.
can be all. And that's the thing is I learned in like 12-step recovery, like our bottoms look different. I mean, there are skid row drunks. There are people living under the bridge there, but there are also housewives and there are also people at 20 years old who get sober. You know what I mean? So it's like not what's on the outside. It's the feelings on the inside. That's what I related to. I didn't like the first meeting I ever went to, the guy had been in jail like 24 times. I was like, I'm not like him, but I didn't know to listen to the similarities. I was trying to separate myself. Like, I'm not like you guys, until I learned, like, listen for the similarities. And once I did, it was like, okay, I belong here. Like, I really relate to how you feel.
Yes, exactly. So I love that you mentioned too. I mean, I don't love this for you, that recovery is not linear,
No.
and that you did relapse
Hmm.
more than once, and that is not
Right.
uncommon, and that doesn't mean that the treatment didn't work and that it's a failure. I mean, there are so many things in life. I'm not crying, I promise. I just
I'm,
maybe I am. Um, there are so many things in life that you're not going to get it on your first go.
totally.
And so you're talking about something that is extremely difficult. And it's literally your own brain's compulsion that you are fighting with
Mhm.
in your own mind. So of course it's going to be very hard. And of course some people are going to stumble and have
Yeah.
relapses. I would love to talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit, depending on what you want to
Oh,
share. I
yeah.
love that. I feel like you're just sort of like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
We're going
I'm
to talk
super
about
open
whatever,
book. I'm like, whatever.
which is that's my vibe too.
Yes.
I love that. So,
Like, if we're
so
going to
yeah.
talk
So
about it,
what
let's really talk about it.
authenticity is key.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you exactly kind of what happened.
Yeah.
And I do recovery is not linear. I mean, sobriety, I guess, staying sober, like not putting substance, that's like the one thing that's like, I guess, required to be sober. But yes, like there's a lot of other ways to act in sobriety. But yeah, cool. Okay. So I ended up moving out to Orange County after I did that treatment. They were like, we highly recommend you do aftercare. I literally had nowhere else to be. I had no job. I had no money. I had burned a lot of bridges. I was like, okay. I was like, well, I would like to learn how to surf. I don't want to go to Florida. They're like, well, we're going to send you to Southern California. I did not realize that there was like a mecca of young, sober people out here. It is, I mean, it is incredible. Like I thought everybody in Orange County was sober. It
Really?
is crazy. There's like over like 2,000 meetings a week or something in Orange County alone. And I mean, it's crazy. You should come out here and, I mean, it's pretty special. And I know
Yeah,
that
that's
like there's
rad.
really good recovery everywhere. I just feel very fortunate that I needed to land somewhere where I knew that like the fun wasn't over. So I got out here. I got very plugged in with other young people who had a little bit more time than me. And I did that for a while. And I put,
And how old were you at this
gosh,
at
that
this
was the
point?
summer of 2004, maybe 25. And I put a couple years together and I was sponsoring other women and I had commitments at meetings and I was, going to dinner after the meeting and we had so much fun. Like I just remember going to my first meeting, South Orange County, and I look around and it's like all these young people that I would party with. And it made me feel like, okay, like, because I thought the fun's over. Like, it's over, party's over. But it was kind of just starting because all the things I talked about doing from the bar stool, I was doing in sobriety. Like I was going to all these different concerts and shows, and we were going dancing, and we were doing all this stuff. Like I had money. Like I didn't have money.
And you're remembering it,
What?
and you're not feeling shitty the next
Yeah,
day,
not
I mean,
feeling
maybe you're a little tired because you didn't get any
yes,
sleep,
but I
but
was young. I couldn't do it now, but well, like just having fun in sobriety, and I had put some time together, and what happened was is some of the eating disorder stuff started to pop up again for me. And I what I love about recovery is like there's no rules. It's kind of as close to anarchy as you can get. Like you can believe in whatever you want to believe in. It's not a religious thing. It can be a religious thing if you want it to be. But I had this concept of this like punishing God, like that, like if things were going well in my life, like that higher power of God, whatever you want to call it, would come and like pull the rug from under me. And so I just felt like with the eating disorder stuff, I was like, this is never going to get better, always going to pop back up. I'm stuck this way. I'm never going to be fully happy or free. What's the point? And in the meantime, I had started dating casually in sobriety, and I was dating a guy who um, I discovered was smoking weed. He didn't have a lot of time. I really thought this was going to be a very casual, maybe one night thing. It turned into a very different, like long-standing relationship. And it was just like the perfect storm. I went to a meeting and they talked about the first three steps about, you know, I can't, God can. So I'll let him. And I just thought, I don't think God can. Like, I think I'm stuck this way. I think I'm permanently stopped. Like, I'm never going to get better. And I walked out of that. It was like a noon meeting, walked out of the meeting. Halfway through, I called my sponsor in the parking lot and I said, hey, like, I don't think God can. I don't think God can relieve me of this. And by the end of the week, I was loaded. And I had to like, I mean,
wow.
it was really crazy. Like when I look back on it, it's so clear now, I'm like, oh, like, how are you supposed to put any trust into something that you believe doesn't have your best interest in mind? So it's like, of course I didn't believe in that. And so,
Well, and that's
we
such
ended up,
an existential horror to grapple with,
yeah,
and I think we all do at some points, but especially if you're doing that in your early
yeah,
sobriety as well, wondering like, you know, does the good guy win in the end?
right.
Does
Like, what's the
God
point?
actually care? Who is going to intervene? If he didn't intervene now, well, why, then why now? Like there's so many questions that you,
Right.
I think, find yourself asking at some point in life, but it sounds like you were really grappling with that
Yeah. Well, and
very
I
early
think I was
on in
also
your
stuck in that.
sobriety. Like,
Yeah. I think I was also very stuck in that black and white alcoholic thinking of like, it's always going to be like this. It's never, always and never are just not great words for us because it's not true. Everything passes, everything changes, whether it's good feelings or bad feelings. I really used to think like I'm just stuck this way, but it's like, that's just a lie. You know what I mean? And so,
I really,
and I gave
yes.
into that. And I was so attached to like, like my body has gone up and down my whole life, right? Because of all this stuff. And I had gained some weight and I was like, I didn't get sober to get fat. Like, it's like that was like the most important thing in my mind for some reason. Like, I mean, it wasn't that, but like, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like in my mind, right? It was
I
such still,
I do. If I can just like interject for a
yeah.
second, because like, gosh, I think this is so important to talk about, especially right now, because I think that things are starting to trend a little bit towards the heroin chic
Uh-huh.
again. And yeah, I was raised in a very thin
Mhm.
family, and I was naturally very skinny, and because of that, you, as in a completely other way, attach your self-worth to what your body is like,
Yes.
and especially as women. I know you know what that's
Yes.
like. We all know what that's
Yes.
like about, you don't want to age and you don't want to get fat and you don't want to, be this, but you got to have curves. And, Tina Fey
Yes.
actually in her book, Bossy Pants, she has an excellent excerpt that talks about that it's never good
Yeah.
enough, but we're always striving for this perfect body image. And I think, to your point, having this, it's like you have enough that you're warring with yourself on, but also society reinforces it like it's
Hmm.
normal. Very similar with like alcohol use and like, oh, we, celebrate with alcohol and we self-soothe with alcohol. It's just alcohol, everything.
Totally.
But also you're a woman. And so therefore you must look like this and not like this.
Don't
And
take up too much space, but also be assertive.
yes,
Yeah. All these contradictions.
I'm like, talk about as you're sort of grappling with this existential, am I always going to be this way? And this eating disorder, you have society sort of reinforcing these beliefs in
Yeah.
you. So, like, to your point, going back to what you were saying about, I didn't lose or I didn't get sober to like gain all this weight. I mean, that's such a subtle, like, how we are brainwashed
Mhm.
in a sense, socially, especially as women, to like, you literally were worried about dying
Right.
and have now saved yourself.
Yeah.
And the fact that,
The jeans are
not to
tight.
shit
Yeah.
on you, right, not to shit on you, like, and here you are thinking about your weight, but that's how ingrained it
It
is
is.
in
It is.
us, that that's coming up for you like that.
It's yeah, it's crazy to look on it. And also to like at that point, I really didn't understand like, the power of our mindset and affirmations and like changing the way our brain is wired. There's I'm sure you're familiar with like Louise Hay and all these like amazing teachers.
I am gonna write it down so I can drop it in the comments on
Yeah.
my stuff to
She
know.
I think it was either her or maybe it was Abraham Hicks. Do you ever listen to Abraham Hicks? It's like I love.
Mhm.
Okay. And she said, a belief is just a thought that you practice thinking. And that is like so powerful to me because if you tell yourself over and over again that you're unworthy or that you're unattractive or that you're not smart or that you're not good enough, like that is a belief. But even if you don't believe it at first and you keep saying it and you keep practicing a thought, it becomes a belief. So it's so like corny. The affirmation thing is so corny, but I'm a real big believer in that because that literally changed my life in a really profound way. And even now, like, cause I can still backslide into like negative self-talk. I mean, that's the easiest thing to backslide into, but it's like I have like this like fix for it where it's like, nope, we're gonna replace that thought. Like, that self-discipline of like, nope, we don't do that anymore. It's like we're not gonna, like you said, it's not linear, we're not gonna be perfect. Our bodies aren't statues. We're gonna fluctuate. Our mental health is gonna fluctuate. Our relationships are gonna ebb and flow. I mean, there's just so many things that like, and that's the thing with social media too, is like the whole like snapshot of like a perfect moment amongst a 24-hour day. I think that's been there's such a positive part of social media and there's such a detriment to like what we're telling ourselves. And I think in the beginning with like all the Instagram stuff, when it was like all these like perfect curated like homes and you're like, why don't I have a home like that? Like the Pinterest homes. And it's like, oh, like
Yep.
maybe you don't know that that's one corner of the house and all the mess is slid over into the others. You know what I mean? Like you're just not seeing the full picture.
Right. Or like, here I am and I'm coming on and I'm sharing like, you know, I don't know, look at this new cute thing that I got today. But in the background, you don't know that like an hour ago, I just came unglued crying in the parking lot because
100%.
my mental health is in the toilet.
Yeah,
That's,
exactly.
yes.
So yeah, and there's that, comparing our insides to other people's outsides. You're never going to come up ahead that way. Like it's me to me. I got to compare me to me. And had I had that, I mean, I had to go through what I had to go through to get where I am today. And so like now I can look back and be very grateful. I'm grateful I survived it and grateful that I had that relapse because I don't know that I would have the spiritual foundation that I have in my life today had I not gone through that. But like had I had that tool to be like, listen, like look at you compared to you like 2 years ago, you know what I mean? Or 4 years ago or 10 years ago. It might have been different. But I just believe that we're not here. Life isn't meant to be easy street. Like we're supposed to go through stuff so that we can build character and grow and then like help people. I think.
Yes. Well, and it's also not, and this is something that I have talked about with my therapist as well. We moved from me seeing her every single week to as needed
Yeah.
basis. And boy, let me tell you, it has been as needed a lot lately. Um, but that's kind of the thing is it's not like, okay, checkbox, I'm healed. It's sort of like, this is actually what we talked about in our last session. It's sort of like, mental health or addiction or anything kind of on that growth and self-healing umbrella.
Mhm.
Kind of like going through and cleaning a house.
Mhm.
And it's some rooms are like, wow, this room is so fucked up. We'll come back to this, or I'm going to need help with this one or whatever. But you get used to it and you get into a routine. And then sometimes you look over and you go, huh, I don't remember that door being there before.
Yeah.
And then you open it up and there's like, oh, okay. It's like Monica's trash closet in Friends,
Yeah.
where she's got like all of her garbage stuff in there. It's like, oh no.
Yes.
And that's how it is sometimes
Yeah.
where it's not like, okay, I'm healed now. I'm sober now. I,
It's
am
normal.
have a handle on this and
Yeah.
this. I do today.
Yeah.
That's why one day at a time is so
It
important
is. And
in
I
the
really
addiction
like
recovery field.
I'm
And
glad it's
yeah.
ongoing because like I don't ever want to feel done like evolving. Like that's like if I if I hit the end, it's like think that's the end of life. It's like, okay,
That sounds boring,
yeah.
right?
Like I could be like, I'm gonna be
I
90
do
still freaking growing, you know?
I do actually have one thing that I learned somewhat recently, just kind of going back to grabbing things and, recycling wisdom and such. I love spin classes, so
Oh,
I'm actually really excited to talk to you about fitness things. But one of the things that they do at the gym that I go to is so many of the instructors have their own vibe, but also have their own sort of message. And one of them, Grace, shout out Grace, um, he said several classes ago, was talking about become the next version of
right.
you, not a better version, because we're not shitting on
Yeah.
today's
Yep.
version. There might be better things, healthier things, new things, but today's version of you is growth from where you were yesterday.
Yes.
So I love that consciousness around the language we use to describe ourselves now. Like, well, I'm becoming a better me. Are you? In what
Yeah.
way? Better than what? Or it doesn't mean that you're bad now. And gosh, that's really just stuck with
I love
me. And
that.
it kind of,
Yeah.
I think, relates to that concept of we're never done.
Never.
So we don't want to shit on our today selves. We're imperfect and we're doing our best. And hey, if today your best is I can give 40% of my energy, you're still giving your
It's
best.
just
That's
about
the
showing
best you
up,
can do
you
today.
know, it's like that consistency of showing up for yourself, whatever that looks like. I love those spin people. I did Peloton for a long time. And so I like,
Oh,
oh
nice.
my gosh, I loved those instructors. I don't really use my Peloton anymore, but I like won't get rid of the bike. I'm like, I really need to probably might be time. But those people are amazing. They're like very high vibration, like motivational speakers in a lot of ways. I've spent a lot of time bawling my eyes out on a spin bike. It really gets you.
I I have cried more than once in that
Yeah.
class. It's also one of my favorite places to meditate
Well, because it
sometimes.
blends
Because
in with the sweat
I'm
too. You can't see. You're like, what?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why
And
are
it's dark and glowy. No one
you
cares,
know,
you know?
sorry. Um, I just
Um,
apologized to my phone that fell. Let's see.
how dare you? I'm so upset.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about sort of your lights in your recovery journey, the things
Mm,
that bring you joy and keep you on track and help you. I mean, I know from following your Instagram that fitness is one, your kids are
yeah.
another. And so, yeah, like tell me the good
Oh,
stuff,
it's
man.
so interesting because like the whole journey with fitness has been so redefined over the past couple of years. Like it's, you know, I grew up playing competitive soccer. I was in the gym at 14, I was going to the gym at 14 years old and was just always like in and out of the gym, and, but it was always like a bit of a prison. It was like this punishment, it's punishment for eating or
Mm.
you're not there for 2 hours. And in the 90s, we were lied to and told that we needed to do cardio, all cardio, don't lift weights. You don't want to look like a man. And so, I mean, I like lived and died on like the freaking treadmill on the Stairmaster. I did not even enjoy it half the time. And so it's been a real interesting journey to get to a place where I'm doing something that feels really empowering, really good. And I feel like my relationship with the gym has become like a mental health tool more than anything. And also like I
Mhm.
like the physical results. Love feeling strong. But my
Yes.
and my best friend she's also sober and she's a bodybuilder and she competes and she does like coaching. I know she's in it's like wild. I'm like, dude, you are on another level, but
That's an interesting
it's
thing,
interesting.
just kind of as the thought where you are, you know, we spend all this time hating our bodies and learning to accept
Uh-huh.
ourselves and then learning to have a healthier relationship with that self image, but also being okay with wanting to look
Yeah.
different, look strong,
It can be an and,
it's,
like an and statement. It's not either or.
yeah,
Yeah. But so yeah,
right.
so I started following her. She has like, an app that she has created. She's all the stuff that she's created for lifting weights. And I was always just so afraid because I am prone to muscle. Like I'm built athletically, like naturally. And well, I can also, pack on pounds naturally too. But like, you know what I mean? Like my body is never, even when I went into treatment and I was like super like skinny, technically, I still could pass as healthy because I was like a lean muscle. You know what I mean? Like people still told me, oh, you look so
Mm.
healthy. You look so good. And I was like, well, I'm not sick enough yet. But now,
Right.
it's crazy. But now it's just become I mean, it's been like a good solid like year and a half of solid consistency. lifting weights. I actually just thought about it the other day. I was like, not going to go to the gym. I usually drop my kids off at school and I go straight to the gym, and I wasn't going to go. And I like found myself in the parking lot and I'm like, oh, this is like a habit now. Like this is something I do without thinking, which is really cool because it used to be such a battle to get myself there because I knew I was going to punish myself. Like I knew I was going to
Yes.
run until I wanted to throw up,
Self-punishment.
you know?
Yep.
And so,
Right. Or I ate, extra cookies
yep,
today or whatever. So I got to go burn this off at the
yeah,
gym. Or I know Thanksgiving tomorrow. So I got to go earn that
earn it.
meal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's not about loving your
exactly.
body versus, I can at least say it's so wild that our interview has kind of fallen at a time in my life where I can relate to the fitness thing because I am not a fitness girly until maybe last
Yeah.
summer. I've ran for a couple of years, like 10 years ago, and it wrecked my knees.
Uh-huh.
And other than that, we did not do sports in high
Okay.
school. We did all of the indoor activities. And I just I knew nothing, did nothing, and anytime I tried anything, it was all about punishing my body
Yeah.
versus doing it for my mental health and doing it because, like, I wanna be strong and I wanna feel
Yeah, I wanna be
good
mobile. I
about
don't wanna have a
this is
sore
a
back. I don't
reward.
wanna get hurt as an old person. Like, I wanna
Yeah,
feel like I can keep up with my kids. I wanna carry all the groceries in at once. Like, like these crazy things that are like, I'm like, "Hey, I got this." Like, you know what I mean? "Oh, can I lift 50 pounds or more?" "Yeah, I can. Give me that box." You know what I mean? Like, where you feel like
actually, yes.
able.
I went to help a friend move she's moving soon, and so she was moving all of her, like, stuff out of a particular space. It's actually who I take astrology classes
Oh,
with,
cool.
and she had a bunch of, like, really old ornate furniture, and normally, I'm not the person that goes and can help lift
Yeah.
things, but this time, it was like somebody was like, "Wow, you moved that whole thing yourself?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I did,
Yeah.
actually." I like, "Oh, okay,"
It's
and it's just such a cool
it gives
feeling.
me, like, this false sense of I always, like, laugh because I'm like, "I could beat up anyone." Like, even though it's, like, this false sense
Yeah.
of, like, I could take anyone in a fight, but I'm not out there trying to fight people, but, no, but it's a confidence builder for sure, and so, yeah, that has been a huge, huge part, and also because I do, like, especially after having I have 2 kids, 2 daughters, and after having kids, like, I always had, like, a bit I wasn't always the most chemically balanced person mentally, but it really tipped the scales for me where, like, the, like, depression and anxiety, which really goes hand in hand with ADHD a lot of the time, really, became something that I couldn't just, like, ignore. So I medicate. I take meds for that, which I found, like, a really good combination of non-stimulant and non-habit forming medications that work for me. But because I'm on a good, I found what's right for me. It doesn't take everything away. It's not like up and down so much, but it can. And I'm very sensitive to hormones. So like like just I can get really low, but the gym or the lifting weights or working out, whatever, movement, right? Like any kind of movement, because I really
Yeah.
do like to be physically active, period. Um, has become such a tool of like taking care of my mental health, taking care of my sobriety. That's definitely one of the my kids for sure. I'm like super involved in their sports and lives. And then we're in that season right now. Like I have a 7, almost 8-year old and a 13-year-old, and they're both busy. And I'm so grateful that I get to be like a sober, present mom for them. I'm lucky. They're lucky. They've never had to know um, parents who weren't sober because there's like that huge wine mommy culture and like, it's
Yes. Oh,
crazy. It's crazy. Like it was really interesting too. Like having kids, you're like told that like, oh, you need wine to do this. Like you're going to need a Xanax to do this. And it's like, well, I don't have that option. So do I just not have the toolkit? Like, how do I do it?
right. There's got to be more than
Yeah, there's
this.
got to be another coping mechanism. So yeah, and I feel like also another huge, huge um thing for me and another thing that I feel so grateful for is just having like that a community, like a big fellowship of other sober moms. Not all my friends are sober, but I do have a big community of other sober moms. And we kind of like raised our kids in community. And like it was like I was one of the first of my friends to get pregnant. And then a girlfriend of mine got pregnant, like, and she had her son like a month after I had my daughter. And we just kind of started coming together and then the other moms kind of joined in and we've just had this like big pack and these kids are growing up with these other kids and it's like I don't have family out here, so it's very close to feeling like family. And it's one of the reasons I stay is because I'm like I don't want to, I mean at some point maybe I'll move, but it's like it's such a special thing to have a community. Like I'm sure you could find it anywhere, but it's like at this point, it's not about me, it's about
But
my
that's
kid.
your community. That's yours, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And so those are things that are super, like, it's important for me to talk to other sober people. It's important for me to talk to other moms. It's important for me to have people to relate to. I think that was like the biggest thing when I went into treatment. I think the most like impactful thing, aside from like all the therapies and all that stuff, was talking about like these things that were once like such a source of secrecy and shame. And we're sitting outside because at that time everyone was smoking cigarettes. And we're talking about our like darkest war stories and laughing and relating to each other. And like there is a great power in relating to other people, which is why I really started to share openly. Cause I'm like, wait a second, like if my darkest stuff can like actually become my greatest asset and I can actually help somebody, like it makes everything worth it. It makes all the hard stuff worth it. And you're like, okay, I'm willing to walk through some hard stuff if this is going to end up being beneficial in the grand scheme of things. But I don't know. I think those are
Like that's the key is living
Mhm.
authentically in every way that you can and just doing it so that other people feel less
Yeah.
alone. I mean, I know that this podcast is not the first of its kind at all, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have more
No, it'll
voices
reach
in the recovery
somebody.
spectrum saying, right, like, hey man, this shit sucks, but it does get better.
Totally.
You know, you are not alone in this.
Like
This
there's a
is a
solution.
form of
Yeah.
community.
And
Yes.
it's like
Right.
if you don't relate to me and I annoy the crap out of you and I'm not the right person for you, let's do fine. Listen to the next one because there may be someone you relate to.
Before we wrap up, I would love to kind of know you as a mom who got sober before motherhood, it sounds
Yeah.
like, and all of that, and now you're raising daughters in today's society with our constantly bouncing around body image
Yeah.
standards and your 13-year-old. So that sounds like that was around the age that you started experimenting. I mean, how are you both managing that kind of for yourself? So, because I could imagine that could be
Mhm.
emotionally challenging and somewhat
Yeah.
triggering potentially, but also to honor your kids and their journey and helping to keep them safe without, I don't know, I know some without restricting
Right.
everything, because it sounds like you are balancing a lot
Uh-huh.
of that.
I
And I'd
mean,
kind of love your
first
thought.
of all, super imperfectly. I'm always screwing them up. Like there are definitely certain moments where I'm like, oh, she's gonna be on a therapy couch talking about this one. Like, I lose my cool, like all the things. But I
Sure.
try, I don't know. It's so tough. Well, first of all, my older daughter is, I mean, I started drinking at 12 and she's 13 and definitely not even in that realm of, um, she's not like doing that right now. But like, in her, we don't know where life is going to lead everybody. But, so
Yeah.
I'm already like, wow, she's like already ahead of me. You know what I mean? In terms of, and, I have a sober husband. He started drinking at 8, which is so young, full crazy story full of trauma and addiction in the home and stuff. But I'm like, we're already like ahead of the game there. But I really choose to have a very, very open door policy about everything. I try to keep everything really age appropriate. Like if my kids ask a question, I'll answer it. However, like I'll let them keep asking, but like I'll stop when they stop. You know what I mean? So I don't want to overwhelm them with things that are like too much information for them. But like
Or
people,
like scare tactics,
yeah,
it
I don't
sounds
want to,
like,
but I do
you don't
also want, I mean, it's different. Like in the 90s, like you knew to stay away from like heroin. That's what would kill you. Now, anything you put in your body could have fentanyl in it. And it's so scary.
Yep.
And so like that's a conversation we've had, and not a lot because we're not really in a space yet where she's been exposed to like people drinking and doing drugs yet. But like it is a conversation I will continue to have because so many, I mean, it's a freaking killer. I've buried a lot of people because of fentanyl. So I think just staying, it is hard. It is triggering. Like having kids will show you where you are not yet healed. And it's like in real time. And you're like, how do I catch up to where I'm at right now? Cause like I'm still messed up about this. And I didn't know I was because now she's going through it's wild. But
Wow.
but
God, I
just
can't
kind of
even
trying to
imagine.
stay honest, and I try to really, like, when I screw up, which I do quite often, because I can be reactive, I apologize. I try to let them understand, like, "Okay, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I was feeling, disrespected, and it made me feel like nobody listens to me." You know what I mean? Like, or something like that, I try to just
That's so
communicate.
great. because you're modeling what it looks like to be a person
Yeah.
and to still be compassionate and on your own healing journey. Because the perfect mom, in my opinion, is not going to be the one that never loses her cool. It's the one that just owns her shit because she's a
Yeah.
human and is just doing her best and is not like sweeping it under the rug or in denial and is just sort of modeling like, hey man, I screwed up, but here's what it looks like to
Yeah.
sort of fix that,
And it's
you
hard. Like
know?
I really felt like for me as a kid, like I'm the youngest. I have an older sister who is not alcoholic. She was like very easy, easy baby, easy kid, easy teenager. You know what I mean? Like I was
That's
she
my younger
what?
sister. That's my younger
Okay. Okay.
sister.
So
I was the
yeah.
oldest and I was the mouthy one.
Yes. And that exactly. I was the wild card. And so I feel like a lot of times in my home, and it's, again, like our parents do the best they can with what they have. They have their own trauma. They have their own limitations. People were not talking as openly back then by any means. So I felt like as a kid, I was like, whatever, when I was seeing stuff that was going on in my home or anywhere else, and I wanted to like call it out, like, and then there was a lot of sweeping under the rug and it was like, oh, Emily, like, I just felt like I couldn't be heard, you know what I mean? And also like too much and like a nuisance and like annoying and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't, yeah, you get it. Yeah. Like, it's like, you're like, I'm
Yeah,
dying to
sure
talk about
do.
the truth and nobody will talk to me about it. We're pretending like it's not happening, but it's happening. And so I'm really trying to foster an environment where like, because I get why parents do that. It's like, they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, I'm really trying to not, I'm really trying to change that. And I think the big thing that I really try to do is just no topic is off the table. I'm really trying to normalize like the one thing I really have done pretty well, which I is like my kids have never heard me say like bad things about my body. And like there's been times like, my youngest will be like, Mom, your tummy's so squishy. And I'm like, I know, isn't it so great? Like, and in my head, I'm like, oh my God, my tummy's squishy. You know what I mean? Like,
Like, share.
like opposite action to like, and it heals me too, because I'm like, yeah, like I had two kids. Like I like, there's parts of my body that are soft. Like that doesn't have anything to do with your worth as a person. Like, so I don't know. I'm really
Right.
trying to like consciously change the things that I know to change. I'm sure there are blind spots. That's the thing is like, we all have blind spots. So like,
Right.
they're going to have kids one day and they're gonna be like, oh, my mom really did this and I'm not going to do that. You know what I mean? Like they'll have their things.
That's normal. I think
Yeah.
all parents fuck their kids up a
Just
little
want to
bit
stir them up a
to
little
some
less.
degree.
No. And we want them to be funny. So we have to stir
Well,
them up a little bit.
you need a sense of humor,
Got a little from them.
especially in this world. So, I guess before we close out, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you really were hoping we'd talk about or that you wanted to share or say?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, relapse is not a requirement for sobriety. I'm like,
True.
if it happens, it happens, but that doesn't mean like you have to. Um, I just,
It's great if you don't, actually.
yeah, it's great if you don't. My gosh, baby course. It is easier. It is easier to stay than it is to come back. I will say that. I will say this last time coming back was a lot different for me. So that guy that I was dating, we were still together and we were both loaded and we were doing everything under the sun. I'm like really, like I go to Al-Anon too. Like I do a lot of like support, I'm very codependent. Like I want to please people, but I also want to be fit in and I want them to like me. Da, da, da. So we went off the rails. Right. And we end up, going through a really nasty breakup. And I thought he was the problem because he drank a little bit differently than me. Like, I'm like, I want to party. I want to get attention. I want to have fun. I want to check out. And this guy was like on a suicide mission. And so we broke up
Mhm.
and I was like, he's the problem. I know how to get sober. And I couldn't get sober. And it took me about 4 or 5 months to put a 30 days together. And it was, cause I thought, well, if I ever need to get sober again, I know what to do. I've been sober before. And it wasn't like that for me. It wasn't like a click your heels and find yourself in recovery. I mean, I had to like claw my way back into my recovery basically, but people who had been there before really pulled me back in. And I kept going, even though I kept getting loaded between meetings. Like I just kept showing up no matter what. And because of that, like I had a spiritual, like internal experience where it was like, I got a new concept of like this higher power because of that, because I could not stay sober on my own. And then when I did start putting days together, I was like, okay, like whatever is at work here, because I don't stay sober left to my own devices, clearly, but whatever is at work here cannot be punishing. Like I knew, like it was this different feeling where it's
Mm.
um, like I had to go through that to experience like, and I'm not religious, so I use this word unreligiously, but like the grace of something else, of something bigger. And someone once described to me grace is like an undeserved gift, right? And it was like, now I'm putting sober days together. Something else is at work here, and that thing can't possibly be punishing. And that was kind of like the beginning of my spiritual foundation into sobriety. And it's not been perfect. There have been times where like my head wants to go, oh, everything's gonna fall to shit again. And it's like, nope, we don't believe in that anymore. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
like want to express like how like I feel very lucky that I made it back. That ooh, making me emotional. That sponsor that I called at that noon meeting. This is actually how I started using this is how I started using Twitter was about 4 years ago. She had 20 years sober and was like really, really big in the yoga community, stopped going to meetings and she passed away as a direct result of alcoholism. Whew, yeah. But that just showed me like you can't say sober on yesterday's sobriety. Like there is no guarantee. Like I have to do something every single day to maintain my spiritual condition, to maintain a connection, to maintain my recovery, because this is a deadly disease. I
Life
will
or
tell
death.
you how many people I have buried because of it. People who had this woman had 20 years sober, I think probably helped thousands of women and men, and it knocked me on my ass. And that's what I like kind of turned to using Twitter to like check out and like just get real dark and like, um, and so
It's a fun void to scream
yeah, and
into,
you know what? I
Twitter
had like
is.
no, it was really weird because I had like no following. So it was like I could just say whatever the hell I wanted. It was like after dark, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
and that's what landed me
That's
there.
funny. That's actually how I started using
Yeah.
Twitter like many years ago. And it was just to bitch because yes, I have my friends and I have my therapist, but there's just something about just saying something into the
Yeah.
void about like everything's fucking stupid,
Yeah.
just like send,
Like the
send tweet.
darkest, most twisted humor, like all that shit that I like that I'm like people who know me really well know my personality, know my sense of humor. I'm really inappropriate. But like I'm not gonna say that on Instagram where I have like all these moms following me and I'm like this mom blogger. So it was very much like and also COVID was going on and like my whole career as like a blogger. I was doing some like speaking, also everything it ended because everything got canceled. So I also was like, I don't know what to do with my life. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just floating in outer space right now. And now this woman who saved my life is dead. And I was like, I don't even know how to compute it. You know what I mean? And so, but it has just been like such a wild ride. And I just feel like so lucky. Like for me, it's always like, well, why do I get to live this life? And so many of my friends and so many people I cared about have not made it. And it's like, okay, I don't get to understand like why some of us make it and some don't. But like the only thing I can do to honor them is to continue to stay sober and live a really good life and like collect these like there's so many gifts of sobriety and it's like I want more. I'm an addict. I want more. So like I have to stay. I have to keep doing it, but it's not always a joyride. And then that I married that man who was the drug addict. And it's like,
What?
oh yeah, we're married. Yeah. I came back
Gosh.
around. I got sober. I was never gonna get back together with him ever. I was like, we are done. I'm done with him. You know, he's never going to get it. Da, da, da. And like about a month or so into my sobriety, he started coming back around and I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't believe you're going to stay sober. And he did. And he started doing his own work and we came back together in about like a year and a half sober. I got pregnant. I was not married. Like, I mean, we did it very backward and it's just been this like wild ride. Like, it just goes to showing you just don't know like what
No.
the
Wow.
universe has a sense of humor. Like, you know, it's been very imperfect, but it's just everything's so like it just makes you laugh. I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know. I don't know anything about anything. It's been
Right.
wild. You know, I've got
It's
these
like
two kids,
in
variety,
the
and
in the Ozarks, I don't know if you've seen
I
that
have
that
love that
show,
show.
but one of my favorite lines is
Oh,
they're just like, "I don't know shit about
yeah,
fuck," and like that's just they're probably gonna have to bleep that, but so,
rude.
so true sometimes. And you just think about it, it's like the more I think I know, the less I actually do.
Yeah, and it's like, who knows where it's going? Like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
shit. I just gotta like buckle in and do my part and try not to like
Hope for
hurt
the
people. Yeah,
best.
I don't know. It's wild. But yeah, so that's I mean, I think that would be like the thing is just that like it wasn't like a picnic coming back. And so if you can it is easier to stay than it is to come back. I will say that. But like there's that cheesy, like there's all those corny like slogans, and they say keep coming back, and I thought it was so corny for so long, and it really actually helped me in so many ways in my life, because when I came back to the gym, it was like keep coming back, even if you feel like a loser, even if you're like embarrassed, even if you're not seeing a result, like just keep going, keep showing up. And that's the thing, is like I think that's like the secret to success in anything, is like you just keep going, you keep showing up to
Up is
people.
the hard part. Yes, dude. Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
It's like
They talk about that in spin classes, which I'm very clearly obsessed
I
with
love
now.
that you love that.
And
It's so fun.
they say that like you're here right now.
Uh-huh.
You made it. That's it. Done. Everything else is a bonus. If you are tired today and you're just here for the vibes, like okay, but you came, you're
Yep.
consistent, and that is the most
And you're
important
building your
thing you need to
habit.
do.
You're building a positive habit. So
Yeah.
like, because there's days I show up to the gym and it's like a lame ass workout, and I'm like, I did not do something
Truck
wrong.
log.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or I do like half of them, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I did what I came to do. I'm leaving. Like I don't feel good or whatever, but it's like the showing up, show up to your life, show up for yourself. Like that is like, I wish I would have gotten that like at a younger age, because I spent a lot of time uh not showing up. Like just like ghosted myself. But yeah, I don't know.
Truly.
I don't know. It's been, yeah, I'm grateful.
Well, I'm grateful to you. This was really rad.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming to talk with me.
Thank you for
And
having me.
oh, my absolute pleasure. I love doing this. It is such an honor and a privilege to talk to people about their stories.
Yeah.
Like so many people have one. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously a shameless plug, but if you're listening to this or if you're watching this and you know somebody or you yourself, probably you yourself, has a story about recovery, like come talk about it. I want to talk to you. And it doesn't just have to be about addiction. We touched on mental health today too. And I really want to branch more into that as well, because they're all so closely tied. And at the end of the day, recovery can mean so many things. And in my opinion, everybody has a story about recovery.
Everyone.
Everybody.
I agree.
So um, I'm Jess. This is Lights of Recovery. Thank you to Emily McAllister. We're going to drop all of her socials down below in the description. Well, all of her socials that she wants to share. Maybe not her completely unhinged dark Twitter, but whatever you want to share, we'll drop it all down there so you guys can give her a follow. She's super rad. I actually follow her on socials as well, and she's fun. She's rad. She's authentic, which we need more people like that in the world. So thank you guys for watching/listening, and I will see you next time.